Mother, what are you doing? As Henry and I were returning from shopping, what we saw was a moving truck parked in front of our house, and our in-laws standing there. The mother-in-law glanced at me, surprised, and continued giving instructions to the movers. What's happening? Don't try to enter our house without permission. You're just a daughter-in-law. Shut up and open the door. He said this and reached for my purse. I panicked, guarded my purse and stepped back. The mother-in-law, smiling slyly, continued. Strangers should leave right now. I was so astounded by her words that I couldn't speak. But Henry, who had heard it all, was visibly upset and shaking. Mom, don't you know? Know what? I thought this was the right time to tell the truth. I decided to tell the raging mother-in-law the real story. My name is Kate Powell. I'm 48 years old and run an insurance agency. I took over the business that my father started. I enjoy fitting things into place, and this job, matching insurance to clients' needs, suits me well. I've continued good relationships with longtime customers from my father's time. And thankfully, business is booming. I met Henry, my husband, through work when I was 30. It was an introduction from a customer from my father's era, who suggested we have coffee. Henry was 2 years older, a very calm and refined man. Apparently, he had just broken up with a longtime girlfriend who cheated on him. We hit it off after just a short conversation and exchanged contacts. It didn't take long for us to start going out. My mother was unwell at that time, and wanting to fulfill her wish to see me in a wedding dress, I started thinking about getting married. I think I was in a hurry. Henry, on the other hand, wasn't as keen on marriage. Yet, respecting my feelings, Henry proposed to me 6 months after we met. And I joyfully accepted, saying, "Thank you." We then quickly proceeded with family introductions and had a small wedding ceremony. My mother, looking very happy at my wedding, passed away peacefully the following month. I was able to fulfill my mother's last wish thanks to Henry. I decided to cherish Henry, who held my hand and stayed by my side even during my mother's funeral. Even after 5 years of marriage, Henry and I didn't have children. We both thought of children as a blessing and weren't too worried, but our in-laws interfered. It was during a Christmas greeting visit. Henry was reluctant to go, but we ended up visiting because my mother-in-law contacted me, wondering why we hadn't come. Still no children? When will you finally show me my grandchild? Mom. We said we're leaving it to nature. If you're going to talk about that, we're leaving. I understand, but maybe this field is bad. That's rude to Kate. Sorry, Kate, let's go. We left the in-laws' house before Christmas greetings. Right from the doorway where the conversation about grandchildren started. I had persuaded a reluctant Henry to come. Yet, back in the car, Henry apologized to me. I'm really sorry for the unpleasant experience. I'm totally fine. I'm sorry for making you feel bad, Henry. I'm fine, they're my parents, after all. But now, Kate, you are my family. If they hurt you, even if they are my parents, I will cut ties. But it's okay, we've been distant for a long time anyway. It would have been the same without you. Henry looked sad as he said this, and all I could reply was, okay. Since then, Henry has been diligent in keeping me and his parents apart, even moving houses. It seemed he ignored all calls asking for our address. For about 13 years since then, I managed to live without meeting my in-laws except at family events. After turning 40, my in-laws stopped mentioning grandchildren, and I felt relieved. However, one day they found out where we live and visited our house. It was a day when Henry was out with a friend. As soon as they knew I was alone, they forced their way in and started rummaging through the house. Oh. You two still sleep in the same bed at your age? How indecent. Kate, these undergarments won't excite Henry, will they? Ignoring my frowning face, they continued rummaging through the rooms. They ate our prepared food and continued rummaging through our drawers and kept complaining. This is why you haven't had grandchildren. Well, there's still hope, look. They then handed me a crumpled newspaper article about a woman who had given birth at 60. I got goosebumps realizing their intentions. I think we've been too lenient. Even a woman her age can have a child. You'll be fine. Maybe you should move in with us. I'm home, is someone here? My father returned in the middle of her speech. We had started living with my father at Henry's request when we moved here. Henry cherished my father, and my father adored him like his own son. Seeing my father enter the room naturally, the in-laws, who were not informed, were shocked. Wait, are you making Henry support your own father as well? Normally, you should first express gratitude to the husband's parents. I didn't know what to say to the in-laws, who were nodding in agreement as if it was obvious. Thank you for always looking after my daughter. We really are looking after your daughter. But never imagined a father freeloading too? Don't you have any pride being supported by our son? Well, yes. My father replied with an ambiguous smile, which seemed to irritate the in-laws, their temples twitching. Dad, Mom. How did you find this place? Henry, who had returned early because a friend who he was going out with fell ill, shouted at his mother in the doorway of the living room, looking furious. The mother-in-law responded with a nonchalant expression. You never told us, so I hired a detective. It was expensive, so please pay for it. No way I'm paying. Henry said this and approached his mother with heavy footsteps, grabbing her clothes. He forcefully made her stand and dragged her out of the room. Hey. That hurts. What are you doing? Henry. You're hurting your mother. Stop it. The mother-in-law's shrieks followed by the father-in-law's angry shouts echoed in the room. However, Henry continued to take the mother-in-law to the entrance and then pushed her out of the house. Don't ever come back. I'm even considering cutting ties with you too. Oh. Is this Kate's doing? Unbelievable. It has nothing to do with Kate. I decided it. Please leave. The mother-in-law was still shouting something. But when Henry threatened to call the police, she reluctantly left. Henry then apologized to me and my father. I'm really sorry. I can't believe she hired a detective. Father, I apologize for the disrespect. No, it's not your fault, Henry. But I know you're a good person. Now let's eat. Thank you, Father. Henry, with tears in his eyes, repeatedly thanked my father. That night, the three of us enjoyed a pleasant meal together. After discussing, we decided not to move, but to call the police if they came again. Surprisingly, the in-laws didn't show up for several weeks. And we thought we could continue our peaceful life. A month after my father passed away, Henry and I were returning from a long trip, having bought something to remember my father by. I screamed in shock. Mother, what are you doing? Returning from shopping, what we saw was a moving truck and the in-laws in front of our house. The mother-in-law glanced at me, surprised, and continued giving instructions to the movers. What's happening? Don't try to enter our house without permission. You're just a daughter-in-law. Shut up and open the door. He reached for my purse as he said this. I quickly guarded my purse and backed away. The mother-in-law, smiling slyly, continued. Strangers should leave right now. I was so astounded by her words that I couldn't speak. But Henry, who had heard it all, was visibly upset and shaking. Mom, don't you know? Know what? I thought this was the right time to tell the truth. I decided to tell the raging mother-in-law the real story. This house is mine, you know? What are you saying? You made Henry buy this house, how shameless. The mother-in-law stared at me in disbelief. When I looked at Henry, he sighed deeply and spoke. It's truly Catel's house. I'm just living here. Henry, are you being blackmailed by Kate? Poor thing, you don't need to tell such obvious lies. Kate is just a housewife, right? Huh? Henry's eyebrows rose at the mother-in-law's words. He seemed angry at the suggestion that I was tormenting him. But more so because she called me a housewife. Kate a housewife? What are you talking about? Kate runs an insurance agency. What are you saying? She's always at home. She goes off to spas and whatnot. Just the other day, she was dining with an unknown man at a fancy restaurant. Disgusting. The unknown man the mother-in-law mentioned must be a client of mine. Just the other day, a client who was also a customer of my father's invited me to a hotel lunch to reminisce about my father. Henry was supposed to come too, but he had work. So we ended up eating together, just the two of us. It was also partly business, as we discussed new insurance. So it wasn't purely personal, and Henry had agreed to it. If they had a detective, they should know that I returned home alone right after lunch. Still, her assertion suggests that they really want to break Henry and I up. I know that man, and he's actually one of Catel's clients. That day, I had my own work, so I couldn't join them, but we sometimes dine together. Henry. You're being deceived. It's not too late. Marry a younger wife and have grandchildren. The thought of marrying someone other than Kate makes me sick. And anyway, I can't have children. What? What do you mean? Not only the mother-in-law, but also the father-in-law beside her was dumbfounded by Henry's outcry. And I, too, was frozen in confusion. Neither Henry nor I had undergone any fertility tests. The reason was that Henry said we should not do it, fearing that if one of us were found to have a problem, it would lead to self-blame. Actually, a few years ago when I had a high fever, the doctor recommended a test, and I secretly took it. Turns out, I was born unable to have children. I was afraid that if I told you, you might leave me. Just because you can't have children doesn't mean I would leave you, Henry. Yeah, I know, but still, I was worried. Upon hearing Henry's words, I instinctively hugged him. And Henry hugged me back. I was filled with the determination to cherish Henry forever. What do you mean? Can't have children. Are you saying you're defective? That's a lie, right? Have you been deceiving us all this time? The in-laws, completely forgetting about me, started to berate Henry. Henry looked at them with a cold gaze. I've told you many times, I'm not your toy. Calling your own son defective is not what parents should do. What's wrong with calling a defective thing defective? The mother-in-law, infuriated by Henry's words, grabbed his chest with both hands and confronted him. Then Henry whispered a man's name quietly. Hearing this, the mother-in-law's face turned pale, and she stepped back from Henry. Who's that? Hi? I don't know who that is. The father-in-law, with a confused expression, and the mother-in-law, suddenly panicking, listened as Henry calmly answered. It's the name of my biological father. What? What are you talking about? Your father is me, isn't it? I didn't know until recently either. Remember you hired a detective for me? I hired one too. And it turned out to be quite enlightening. Saying this, Henry operated his smartphone and showed it to the father-in-law. The mother-in-law was already pale. And upon seeing the smartphone screen, the father-in-law's face turned bright red and began to tremble. You You've been cheating on me. So, this guy is Henry's father, meaning you've been cheating for 50 years. No, it's not like that. How is it not? You're hugging each other in the picture, yet you deny it. As the in-laws began to argue loudly, Henry and I asked the movers to move our belongings to a storage unit near the in-laws' house. Although they said there would be an extra charge, the in-laws would be paying. And since they caused this mess, it seemed only fair to make them bear the cost. So, I've been raising someone else's defective and unrelated son, huh? The thought of spending money on you makes me sick. Henry, you're responsible for supporting me. Got it. Huh? No way. Why not? You have a duty to support me. The father-in-law then lunged at Henry. Henry pulled himself away and smiled. The only one who needs to take responsibility is Mom. I've just been living my life. Besides, you two didn't even pay for my high school and college. I've been supporting myself since high school. How dare you say that? How can a father who steals his son's hard-earned money and prevents him from hanging out with friends demand more? That's what you are. Finally, I understood why Henry especially despised his father. But the father-in-law acted as if it was his right. A child's money belongs to the parents. And a child's wife's money too. Well, we're not blood related. On paper maybe. If you want to cut ties so badly, pay back all the money I spend on you. I've already paid it back with the monthly allowances. What? Allowance. I knew Henry had been sending money to his in-laws. He even paid more than they asked to keep them away from us. But the father-in-law seemed genuinely unaware of the allowance. Look, you've been receiving money every month. Every month $1,500. What is this? Ah, I see. All my money, Mom's been using it all. With her lover. What? The mother-in-law just flustered and said nothing. The father-in-law approached her and slapped her. The mother-in-law initially looked surprised, but then glared and screamed at him. What do you mean? You should be thankful you could marry me. A man with no money or status. That man is someone with money and status. I just didn't divorce you because it was convenient for enjoying life with him. I even let you raise his and my child. Be grateful. Are you kidding me? You said you were pregnant. So I married you even though your father beat me. Yes, so what? It would have been pitiful if he had been beaten. As the mother-in-law defiantly changed her attitude, the father-in-law was speechless. At that moment, her phone rang loudly. The mother-in-law checked it and, with a delighted expression, answered in a sugary voice. Hello? What's up, darling? Miss me? I got goosebumps hearing the mother-in-law's soft tone for the first time. Henry, too, was looking at her with a twisted face. Yet, he was smiling. I would soon understand why. What? Who is this? His wife. Oh, no, this is a misunderstanding. Everything? Compensation. $1 million. Wait a minute, please. The mother-in-law was frantically talking on the phone. But it seemed like the call was forcefully ended, and she looked dazed. Henry watched this and chuckled. So, she got all the photos and recordings, huh? Huh? This is your fault, isn't it? Just sharing information. Oh, and by the way, his wife isn't planning to leave him. He's her adopted son-in-law, after all. Tough times ahead for you. Adopted son-in-law. You didn't know that? Apparently, he's got several mistresses. His wife told him to only cheat with younger women. So he's probably getting an earful right now. Mistresses? But he said he only loved me. The mother-in-law collapsed in shock upon hearing this harsh truth. The father-in-law looked down at her with satisfaction, then suddenly turned to Henry. You must have it tough with a mother like that. Tell you what, let's forget about all this and live together. Just cut ties with your mother and it'll be us three, you, me, and Kate. Kate, I'll even massage your feet. Don't you dare go near Kate. Unfazed by Henry's words, the father-in-law approached me. As his hand touched my shoulder, I grabbed it and threw him to the ground. What the? The confused father-in-law looked up at me as I gazed down at him coldly. Actually, I've been attending self-defense classes since I was young. Being in the insurance business, dealing with various clients, some could be unpredictable. My father had made it a condition for taking over the company. To ensure I could escape if I ever found myself in a suspicious situation. I started taking the classes reluctantly but eventually found it enjoyable. And have continued it ever since. I wondered if it was too much against a 75-year-old father-in-law. But seeing Henry looking satisfied as he watched, I felt a bit relieved. The father-in-law, still in shock, couldn't utter a word, but then the mother-in-law spoke up. Kate, you're amazing. You really do seem capable of anything. So, about his wife's compensation, could you pay it? If we live together, we can save on living expenses, and I can do household chores. And about children, we could adopt. I'll take good care of them. You must be joking. I won't let a woman like you into a house filled with memories of my father, Henry, and me. Plus, why should I pay the compensation? Pay it yourself. It seemed that in throwing the father-in-law, I had also discarded any pretense of politeness. And I was able to say everything that I thought to the mother-in-law. She was stunned at first, as I had never spoken to her like this before. But quickly her face turned red and she began shouting again. How dare you speak to your husband's mother like that? I already told the neighbors you're moving in. And the demolition of that house has already started. That's right. We don't have a house to live in anymore. So, not her, but let me live with you. What are you saying? You should live with your real mother, shouldn't you? As the father-in-law got up from the ground and yelled. And the mother-in-law retorted, Henry calmly and sternly conveyed our decision. We're not living with either of you. We've decided to cut ties. If you keep making a scene, I'll call the police. Police. At the mention of the police, both in-laws paled and stepped back. Then they left, still arguing, towards the station. Later, I heard that the in-laws divorced, but since neither had any money, they still are living together. The father-in-law tried to claim compensation from the mother-in-law and her lover, but it was offset by a claim from the lover's wife. The mother-in-law, having never worked a day in her life, struggled to hold down a job and lived in hardship. Similarly, the father-in-law, it seems, could barely make ends meet with the two of them working. The lover, thoroughly squeezed out, lost his rights to succeed as the next company president and is now confined to his home. His wife, unforgiving of a 50-year affair, is set on extracting every last penny. Henry seemed surprisingly upbeat despite all this, as if he'd moved past it. Apparently, the lover's family approached him about becoming an adoptive son and inheriting their estate, but he declined, saying, "It's too much for me," and even signed papers renouncing his inheritance. Not one for competition and having little desire for more. This seemed typical of Henry. Though I felt a bit disappointed, I was also happy about his decision. As for me, I'm currently excited about a cat offered to me by a client. I've already decided on the name Marine, inspired by the ocean-like blue eyes of the cat and the fishing trips my father and Henry used to enjoy. Henry seems a bit excited too, anticipating our new family member. Just then, the doorbell rang, signaling the client's arrival with a Marine. Time to meet our new family member. I felt my heart racing as I opened the door with a cheerfully welcome.